We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
Videocasts like this.
Podcasts like this.
Crowdcast events with famous authors.
Live quizzes.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you'll never forget.
There's only one way to guarantee getting all of this, to getting it before anybody else, and that's to sign on to be a supporter on Patreon.
Full details at this address.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Well, welcome to another Word in Your Attic, where we're joined by a graphic designer who's publishing a book about some of the tremendous album sleeves that he's been responsible for over the years. Some of them very familiar, Paul Weller and and George Michael and the Who and Oasis. Welcome aboard, Simon Halfon.
Thank you. What a pleasure it is to be here. This is quite something.
Where do we find you? Where are you?
I'm in the top floor of my house, which is my office, and
in what part of the world?
Oh, in what part of the world? I beg your pardon. Just in sort of northwest London, just heading up towards Golders Green.
Oh, right.
So the Golders Green borders.
Well, we usually start with a few early records that people remember from their youth, things they're very fond of, memories, first records bought or whatever.
An evergreen in my world, and this was the very first record I was ever bought.
Oh, very nice.
My grandparents.
Is that a mono copy?
It would have to be, wouldn't it?
Well, I hope so. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah,
I'm sure some people would have had.
Are there any other copies? Is there any other version?
Well, not to my mind, but if you knew people who were prosperous enough in 1965, 4, whatever it was, they probably had stereo. But no. Anyway,
this is a record that, this is probably the only record that I had for 10. 12 years.
Oh, really?
You only had one record for 12 years?
No, but I got given this when I was like 4 or 5.
Oh, I see.
By my grandparents. So it was just something that I played and played and played and played. And it's funny. I've always loved the cover, obviously, and it really, I think the cover stayed with me. The great Robert Freeman shot, but not so much the picture, but the way the kind of the gatefold with the
it's lovely
slipping inside.
Yeah,
and that was something that I kind of borrowed and used in later, my grown-up life. Used it on our favourite shop with the Style Council. We did it on Stanley Road, and it was very much something that Paul kind of tapped into as well. And this record actually appears very quietly on the back of our favourite shop.
Oh, is it?
Oh, you actually put the sleeve in?
Yeah, we actually put the sleeve in.
Oh, brilliant.
And I'll tell you what else we put in as well, which you've got behind you, Mark, is the Lennon and McCartney David Bailey shot.
Oh, the Bailey shot. I have got it behind you. You're absolutely right.
And then we mirrored that. Nick Knight mirrored that setup to take a picture of Paul and Mick, which is on the inside of the gatefold. But I'll show you that later when I sort of dig out the record sleeve.
Yeah, have you got another record there?
Yeah, another record, which was more when I was sort of just going into the 6th form at school, and it was
right. So which one?
Enduring. So which is the record?
Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll.
Oh yeah,
right. Okay,
which for me was it was in a funny sort of way was my sort of entry into sort of the world of punk and new wave. Because it was very much the sort of the record that everyone spoke about at school. I guess because it had the word sex in the title. But
of course.
What a great record.
And drugs.
And drugs.
Yeah, exactly. Covered all the bases. Didn't you work at Stiff? You got a job at Stiff Records, didn't you? When you were...
Yeah, but my relationship with Stiff started because I went to school in Hammersmith and I lived in Swiss Cottage. And so I would, on the way back from school, I would stop off at Alexander Street, which is where their first offices were, and get badges and posters and whatnot. So I had a relationship with Stiff as a 16-year-old, and then I went to university, albeit very briefly. That's where I met one of your other guests, Tracy McLeod, and we've been friends.
Oh right,
yeah,
from way back when. But I only did the first year. As sometimes people do. And so I came back from university and I wanted to work in music. I loved music. Music was sort of everything. So not being able to play anything and certainly not having any idea about art or sleeve design. And I was a massive fan of the Clash as well as the Jam. And I was walking down Oxford Street one Sunday with some friends, and I saw Cosmo Vinyl walking down, bowling down as only Cosmo can. And I didn't know him, but I recognised him. So I went over and had a chat with him. Oh, God, how are you up to? And he was sort of, kind of holding court in the way that Cosmo does. And one thing that transpired from that conversation was that he was working out of Stiff Records. So come later that year, when I'd been back from university, I thought, oh, well, I'm connected. I know Cosmo. So I went to Stiff Records at 9:30 on a Monday morning, and I said, oh, is Cosmo in? This is when they'd moved to above the cab office in...
Oh, Camden Town.
No.
Oh, yes. Okay. Right.
Yeah, sort of off the Harrow Road.
Harrow Road, yes.
Yeah, the cab rank downstairs.
Yes.
And that's where, I got to know, I'll explain that in a minute, but anyway, so Cosmo, I said to the receptionist, oh, is Cosmo here? And he said, well, he doesn't come in every day. And when he does, he doesn't come in this early. And I said, well, do you mind if I wait? And so sat in the corner waiting, and as luck would have it, about 45 minutes later, in bowls Cosmo, looks at me, sort of half recognizing me, thinking, well, I know that face. And he goes, oh, yeah. And I said, oh, I've come to have a chat with you. And he goes, oh, okay. So he leads me into the post room, and he said, well, what can I do? How can I help you? He said, well, I said, I want to come and work for you. He said, oh. He said, well, the Clash aren't doing anything at the moment. I'm not earning. He said, hang on a minute. So out he went, left me in the post room, the post room was kind of wall-to-wall boxes of records and T-shirts and posters, literally piled high up to the ceiling. It was like a mini warehouse. Leaves me in there for about 5 minutes, comes back in, and he says, do you want to work here? And I said, yeah, great. So I started there and then working.
This is like living in a movie. It's not like real life at all.
No, well,
that's brilliant.
It couldn't happen in today's world.
No.
You couldn't get past the security at the front door, would you? And so I sort of made it my business to sort of be the first one in, last one out every day. And I loved every second of it. And after about 6 weeks, they said, listen, should we kind of formalize this and make this permanent? Because it was just as a temporary thing to start with. And
so you were kind of office boy.
This was the era of Tenpole Tudor, presumably. Was it Department S?
This
Bands
was
like that? Madness?
Absolutely the Madness, second Madness album. So I think Baggy Trousers was just out, and it was that Christmas, the big record for them was Jonah Lewis' Stop the Cavalry.
Oh, of course.
Huge hit.
Do It Yourself. It was that kind of era, and Tenpole Tudor as well. And yeah, so that was sort of...
But how did you get into record sleeve design from there then?
Well, I started off in the post room, and then they promoted me to being a plugger, which I wasn't which I wasn't great at, nor did I enjoy. And so I was just fearful of going up to Radio 1.
So you were the person, you were like 19, 20 years old, they said, go to Radio 1 and get them to play
the Bell Stars.
No, it wouldn't be that. You wouldn't be going in with the big records. You'd be going and taking the new Joe King Carrasco record.
There you go.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Here's the new Dirty Look single. You're on the phone. So, and it was like I don't know, it scared the living bejesus of me going up there.
I bet it would.
Not only did you have to know which producer worked for which DJ, you had to know the secretary for which producer.
Yeah.
No one sat outside anyone's office. It was so.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, more often than not, I'd go up there and I'd say, and I'd come back, and Sonny, who was the plugger, would say, how'd you get on? And no one was in. They weren't in.
What a miserable life.
I've done that job myself. I know what it's like.
So in answer to your question, I'd become friendly with Department S had just signed to Stiff, and I'd become friendly with the late Vaughan.
With Vaughan, yes.
Lovely fella.
Yeah.
And he just said, it's interesting, you mentioned Tenpole Tudor. This is how I met, and it was through Gary Crowley, actually, another guest on your show, and it made me laugh because I heard your show with Nigel Dick, and you talked about Tenpole Tudor. And so I was I went with Tenpole Tudor to Top of the Pops when they were doing Swords of a Thousand Men, and my job was to carry 4 bin liners full of chainmail. That was my that was my job.
That was their costume, was it?
It was their costume indeed, yes, in bin liners. And on arriving at BBC Television Centre, the door was held open for me by Gary Crowley, who I hadn't met before. And, you know, Gary Crowley, being Gary, no sooner had he opened the door and held it open, I asked him, do you like the jam? You know, that was the sort of the first question, and the answer was yes, of course. So our friendship.
So we can be friends.
So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, otherwise,
yeah. And Gary was there with Department S, who were doing his Vic there, and so I'd become friendly with Vaughan, and Vaughan had said that he wanted to do his own record sleeve for the next single, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to help you out with that." And so we went in one Sunday to Stiff, and just did it, and.
So let me interrupt you. Is that the follow-up to his Vic there?
No, they had another one called Going
Left, Right. Oh, okay.
I remember.
Which, as I say in my book, did neither. It didn't trouble the charts. One way or another. It didn't go left or right. It just came out. But the third single, I think their last single for Stiff, was I Want, which I designed with Vaughan, and Vaughan designed, and I helped him. And I think the kind of word had got out that I was not doing a tremendous job as a plugger. And so they moved me into the art department as a consequence, because I think they liked having me around, but couldn't think what to do with me. And they thought, he's done a sleeve.
You failed upwards. That's the best way to do it. That's why they obviously liked having you around. They didn't want to get rid of you.
It was a great place to work back then.
Yeah.
And it was really a lot of fun, and it was a good time, most definitely. And so that was the first. I've got it here actually. That was.
Let's see it.
Oh right! Oh God! Yeah, I've probably got that somewhere.
It's so interesting. At that time, I'm amazed how much control musicians had over their own sleeves. The idea that we would recruit you to do the sleeve, because that's what happened with the Style Council, wasn't it? I think.
Expertise. Who would say no?
Yeah, exactly. But that's what happened with the Style Council, wasn't it? That you ran into Paul Weller, and I think then he just commissioned you, didn't he? Rather than the record company.
I was a massive Jam fan, as I told Gary Crowley as he held the door open for me. And you know, I'd met Paul when I was at Durham actually, and when the Jam played at Bridlington. And so the thing about Paul was he always had a great memory for a face and a name. So if he'd see you, even just to get his autograph or whatever, which it was back then, he'd remember you the next time he saw you. What you been up to? Well, last time I saw you, great. And so on one of those, and in those days, it was a sort of small world. So you'd kind of hear, the Jam are recording up at Air Studios. So instead of going up to Radio 1 with my box of Joe King Carrasco and Dirty Looks records, I'd go up to Air Studios, which was around the corner in Oxford Street, and pop in and see the Jam. And they'd always be really friendly. And I remember one time just walking out with a kind of white label of Town Called Malice and pre-release, and God, I thought that's all my Christmases had come at once. It was amazing. So, but anyway, Paul was always very friendly, and he knew that I just, after that, because of the relationship with Vaughan, he was a big fan of Department S. I think Department S has supported the Jam a couple of times actually, and so he knew I was doing a bit of design work. And so the first thing that came up was a book, a very small book that he was doing about the Small Faces, or he was publishing about the Small Faces. And so I designed that. It's just not much more than a fanzine, really. But it was still something exciting to do. And then I'd left Stiff, and Neville Brody, I went to work for Neville Brody, who had just started at the Face magazine.
The Face, yeah.
You did quite well here.
You really landed on your feet.
Neville was there's a lot of great artists.
A man who invented his own typeface. Yeah.
Sorry?
He invented his own typeface, Neville Brody.
Many of
them. Several. Yeah.
And so Neville was a former Stiff employee, and
was he? I didn't know.
Yeah. And he'd still pop in and out and everything. And when he heard that I was leaving, he said, why don't you come and work for me? I need an assistant. And so I jumped at it, and that was a real learning experience for me. Because
I bet it was.
Yeah, in those days, you know, it wasn't like, oh, you just sit at a computer and try and figure stuff out. It was sort of a skill where you had to learn how to mark up.
Oh, absolutely.
You were the. Let me
There was
guess.
letter set
Were
involved.
you the guy who went down the Arch supply shop, got the letter set?
Got the spray mount.
Pick up the typesetting, did all those things. Yeah, and even things like, you know, used to have a PMT machine that enlarged and reduced type.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Big old clunky thing. So I would do that, those bits and pieces for Neville. But not only did I learn the physical side of things, I actually learned an aesthetic from him as well. You know, he was a big influence because I was a blank canvas. I was a sponge.
I was going to say you hadn't been to art school or anything like that.
No, not at all. No, and
It's astonishing.
nor had any aspirations to. It wasn't like I was like a art school dropout or anything. I never even, you know, I think the first time I'd even heard the word art school was because it was listed on the Jam's first album. Oh,
show us the sleeve. Show us the style. Have you got a Style Council sleeve there?
Yeah, I've got. I mean, this is the first album that we did.
Right. Oh yeah, I've got that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which.
So what year are we talking about there?
84.
Okay.
See, that's a brilliant period, that, because Jam fans were kind of horrified. Dave and I were at Smash Hits at the time. Jam fans were horrified, weren't they, Dave? The idea that Paul Weller was now going off to Europe, you know, wearing espadrilles, you know, fashionable Macintoshes, and drinking what we used to, I think, call frothy coffee.
Exactly, yeah. It's funny. Funny enough, quite recently I bumped into Neil Tennant, and I don't know Neil particularly, but I remember Neil Tennant from his Smash Hits days coming down to. First time I met Neil was when he came down to interview the Style Council at Solid Bond Studios, and I reminded him of that. And he said exactly the same thing. He said, you know, before the Style Council, we were just drinking frothy coffee.
That's right.
That's true. It would be about that. It'd be about. Actually, it would be later than that I was first asked in a coffee shop. I want a cup of coffee, and they said, "What do you want? Cappuccino, latte, or other?" What is this language they're speaking? And that must have been about 1985, 86 or something like that. Not later.
So
we were in the market for milky tea in those days. Yeah. That's great. What were you trying to reference for those sleeves? I mean, did you commission that shoot? Presumably you did.
Yeah, it wasn't, you know, word commission wasn't, we just went, you know, we went to the photographer, and the idea was to kind of something that kind of captured sort of paparazzi images of old, not the paparazzi that, you know, it's before paparazzi was a sort of an everyday word.
Yeah.
It was almost trying to recapture Alain Delon and Brigitte Bardot on the cassette, and, you know, something, a stolen moment. That was the idea. And another big influence at the time, obviously, was Blue Note. And it wasn't the way you kind of found things, Blue Note, was by discovering things in record shops. And a lot of those things weren't released anymore. And there were no books as such to get. So it was literally, the record shop became like your library in a way. And none more so than when you went to New York. You know, I was lucky enough to go to New York a few times because my brother was living there at the time. And you just going, I would come back with bags full of these old Blue Note albums, and they were really the sort of the influence for how the look of the Style Council. Because someone pointed it out the other day, and I hadn't really taken it on board, but because there was a documentary on TV this last weekend, and saying that, you know, there's very few bands have one designer all the way through. So I was quite fortunate to have that with the Style Council. And they were a great band. And the thing about them as well is they really made you feel part of the team. So it was kind of like you were part of their inner circle. And Solid Bond Studios, which is the studios they had in Marble Arch, was like the little clubhouse. And you could walk, they were in there every day. You know, they owned it. So they just were in there. And you just go down there and have some fun and listen to these tracks being, you know, recorded. And I remember hearing My Ever Changing Moods for the first time, and, you know, I was 21, 22 or whatever, and walking in, Paul Simon would play this, and it was just like, bloody hell, does it get any better than this? It was kind of almost like they had a run of singles that kind of, I mean, very few people had the run of one after another that was so different, and, you know, with pop at its core, really.
Yeah. So when you started designing, you were designing LPs, were you?
Well, singles and LPs, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But quite soon it became CD, didn't it?
CDs sort of came along, I would say, probably not till the late 80s, really.
Oh,
They
okay.
did. But didn't that change? Must have changed your idea of what kind of images would work and what wouldn't work, because it then has to work in just a tiny little format, isn't it?
To be honest with you, I never gave it too much thought, really, because the artists that I worked with were always very concerned about the LP, the vinyl. So,
Yeah.
So you would always just do the scale down version, obviously to make sure typographically it read still.
Give us some more examples. What else you got there?
Well, there's a couple of things. What else have I got? Well, this came pretty much the same time as came just before.
That's the best of, isn't it?
Sort of the best of the jam, yeah. Which was obviously a great thrill to do that. Am I holding it the right way?
Yeah. That's lovely.
So that was great to do that, and then Cafe Blur came shortly after that, and what else have we got here? That's from that time. I had the opportunity, good fortune at that time of meeting Dezo Hoffmann.
Oh, right.
And
The
Dezo,
great Beatles photographer.
exactly, yeah, and very famously took the picture of them in their Pierre Cardin suits, sat round the chair. That iconic shot, but also spent a lot of time with them, and I got to know him a little bit. And I was commissioned by Polydor at that time to do a greatest hits for the Who, and as well as that, a greatest hits for Astrud Gilberto, and a single for James Brown. They were reissuing Sex Machine, and so it gave me the opportunity to go through Dezo's archives, and so I thought, let's use his imagery, and the Who one is that.
Right.
Nice, yeah, lovely.
Yeah, and that is Letraset. It absolutely is. I still remember painstakingly.
So Dezo Hoffmann, did he have a very organised archive? Did he know where?
Quite organised, but the one thing and this is the Astrud Gilberto.
Oh,
That's good. That's great.
Yeah,
that's lovely.
Yeah, and that's one of my favourite.
Great colours. It's brilliant.
Yeah, he did. But one of the things, and you'll probably be aware of this to a degree, that he was sort of moaning to me that he didn't have any colour images of the Beatles, because he said the turnaround was so fast then with magazines that you would just give them your originals, and they wouldn't be returned. And so he was sort of a bit down about that. I remember on one of my trips to New York, I picked up an old Beatles fan book that had all these colour pictures of them. They were all Dezo's pictures, so I bought it for him and gave it to him as a present. And he very kindly gave me a couple of prints, but as a thank you. But you feel bad for those guys that.
Well, colour, I mean, it was not a priority, certainly. I mean, in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't a priority at all because there was no outlet for it.
Well, the press, the pop press couldn't really use it. They all wanted black and white pictures.
Like Rave magazine and those sort of fabulous magazines would have taken them and just not given them back. And
and
they probably end up in Roy Carr's basement or something.
Well, they probably more to the point ended up in a bin at a colour house or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be the.
It's perfectly possible because these things used to be attached to enormous drum scanners, didn't they? And then afterwards they were just lit. That's my main memory of a kind of. I'm not a designer, but the thing about designing in those days was it all stuck to the soles of your shoes, didn't it? It was.
You walked around the office.
It was smelly. It was difficult. It was,
cow gum and spray mail.
It was Blue Peter,
Yeah,
it's amazing how it changed. There was a machine called a grant enlarger. Do you remember the grant enlarger?
Yeah.
Where you put a record on it, and you put a canvas hood over your head, and you wound little handles that brought up a glass tray, and you shone a light underneath it, which projected onto tracing paper. Yeah. And that's how you worked out the shape of the image on the cover or whatever. I mean, it's amazing. It's not that long ago, really.
Yeah, that's how Neville was laying out the face in those early days.
Yeah.
So,
so beyond the Polydor stuff, I think you did the George Michael, didn't you? Have you got the George Michael
yes,
incredible Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1, which Dave and I are rather obsessed with. One of the most extraordinary covers of all time. Because George Michael, what an extraordinary decision to use that picture, which was by Ouija. I can't remember who took it now. Was it Ouija? Of Coney Island in the 1940s.
It's well, interestingly, that sleeve didn't start off life like that. That sleeve, or that album started off as that was going to be the record sleeve.
What?
Good
Go on.
Lord.
Tell us more about that, because we can't see an awful lot of that.
Well, there is a lot to see.
Right. Well, explain. But
What, that was going to be the sleeve of Listen Without Prejudice?
Yeah, it was just going to be blue. And so George being George,
My God.
said, I want to do the sleeve. I've got this idea. It's going to be blue. And he said, let's just do some proofs ourselves. Let's not do it through the record company. We'll just get them reproed ourselves.
So just winding back a second, sorry, to make this story go better. The previous album you hadn't done.
No,
Faith.
I hadn't. And I'd become
And that was Faith,
George.
It's Faith,
Yeah,
which is a very kind of groovy close-up picture of the artist.
The making of a huge international pop star.
Yeah.
Huge.
So he
selling
wanted to go as far as possible in the other direction.
In the other direction, exactly. And so I'd become friendly with him just because we, through various, just socially, because he lived up the road, and got to know him through his cousin, and we just become pretty good mates actually. And just from one day on the way home from having dinner locally, I sort of said, "Oh, listen, have you thought about the sleeve for your next album?" I said, "I'd love to have a crack at it." And he goes, "Oh, I don't know why I didn't think of that. Absolutely, let's do it." So he went away and said, "Listen, I want to do this thing, but it's just blue. I just want it to be blue." And I'd just done, I've got it here. I did The Cost of Loving for the Style Council, which was just orange, of which I got a great deal of flack for, and it's become known as the Orange album. And so I was all for it. I thought, "Oh, that's great."
Did that blue cover, did that ever get as far as the record company? Did they get to see that?
Well, it got as far as George's manager, who was in America. So we FedExed it to him, overnighted it to him, enthusiastically waiting for his response. I get a call, the next day from Rob Kahane, his manager, and Willie's his assistant. "Hey, I've got Rob for you." "Oh, hi, Rob. Are you fucking kidding me?" No, hello, no place.
To be fair, quite rightly.
Yeah.
Because if you think how much, have you got the Coney Island shot there as well?
I have got.
Because if you think how much
I've got a
controversy there was about that,
Yeah.
because it didn't have George Michael on it, But
Well,
that's infinitely preferable
Rob
to just
was
a
very
black
good
blue
at
sleeve.
saying, "Oh, Walmart's won't stock it. This one won't stock it. They're not going to buy this record. If you want to be the guy, there's this, and if you want to, kamikaze, all the right words." And so I went back to George and I said, "Well, Rob got it. Good news, it arrived."
It arrived all right.
Yeah.
So he kind of said, "Okay," and so the next thing that happened was, what do we do next? So it's literally going back to the drawing board, which it actually was in those days. It was a drawing board.
Yeah, right.
And I had bought George a book of 20th century photography as his birthday present. In those days, coffee table photography books weren't as readily available as they are today.
No.
And we were just flicking through it. And then we saw the Ouija photograph, and we both looked at each other like that and went, "That's the cover." And I think it was $500 later, we got the rights to it very kindly from Ouija's widow, and that became the cover. And I just wanted to show you.
But what a controversial picture that was
Yeah.
at the time. I mean, my God.
You two gentlemen are probably too young to remember the long box, as it was.
Oh no, I do remember.
The long box.
It's a hideous American way of packaging CDs in a
exactly,
yeah.
to make them stand up in record racks.
So that's the source. That's the kind of right way. That's the sort of the Ouija shot there.
Yeah.
But just to show you for the younger
Viewer.
That's how you presented artwork back then. You kind of had to.
Right. Just the lettering and
you'd have the grant and
space for the
over the top.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
So, then there's the cow gum and spray mount that tells.
Yeah.
It's funny though, that Ouija pictures. It's taken at Coney Island, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that in 1940s?
In the 40s, I think.
1940, and it's over 1 million people on the beach.
Because this is interesting. I'm in the middle of reading an enormous great book about Robert Moses, who planned New York, and that picture means something significantly different to New Yorkers of that time than it would mean to foreigners like us, which was the people who spent whatever, Labor Day or whatever, on the beach of Coney Island, were the people too poor to be able to afford a car out into Long Island to go somewhere more pleasant. So
It's
was
a working class
it's
image.
a really working class,
Yeah, it is.
absolutely.
image of working class solidarity. I don't know if it was taken with that intention in mind, but that's the kind of subtext
I think
to it.
It first appeared in the New York Times, sort of the day after. So it was very much a reportage photograph.
Right.
There is something extraordinary about looking at pictures like that in these current circumstances too, but just thousands of people crammed together, and just you look at it and just think, good Lord.
I tell you what though, Dave, just the Listen Without Prejudice experience is such a fascinating example, because I talk to people in book publishing all the time. I talk to them about artists and recording artists, and who made the Fleetwood Mac album Rumours look like that. Fleetwood Mac did. Yeah. It's their decision. Like George Michael decided that was going to be on the cover of his.
But that would never be allowed in
the word of books. J.K. Rowling can't even tell you what's on the cover of her new.
Martin Amis waded in and said, "This is the shot." Nobody would take a remote bit of interest. They just wouldn't. Whereas they'd be very polite, but they'd say, "We've got the graphic designer in charge of this."
I don't know. Example of. I don't know if that would be true today, though, with records.
Possibly not. Although, possibly not right across
Style
the
Council era. We would have a different image on the LP cover. There'd be a different image on the cassette cover. A 7-inch single would be different to the 12-inch single, and the posters would not reference the imagery from either. So the poster would be different. The adverts would each publication would have a different advert, and so you'd have a bit of fun with it. Whereas today everything's, I think what's happened is that back then you had an art director, and the art director would kind of let you get on with it, but now it's sort of that role no longer exists within a record company. An art director, it's all done through product managers, so it is about managing the product, I guess.
But there is still the point, and I'm sure this still applies with, I don't know, Ed Sheeran or whatever, who can presumably get his own way, that the packaging of the record is seen as being part of the artistic statement of what's on the record. Traditionally, in the record business, that's the way it's been.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it still
is. That's true. It's an extension of the music rather than a commercial high impact image to have in shops. It's meant to be part of it, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I think we've all got those. I'm drawing on Beatles for Sale again as an example. That's your first, when you think of an album, the picture in your head is the cover.
Yeah.
So it is your kind of, even if it's a subconscious thing, that is the moment that is kind of emblazoned in your memory, really.
Well, and that's the thing, as I said, when I wrote a book about LPs, is that the publisher of George Orwell's 1984 republishes it every 5 years with a different cover.
Yeah, there are tons of different covers.
Nobody would do that with Sergeant Pepper or Born on the Run. You simply couldn't do it.
No,
because you'd be interfering, and also there's the other interesting thing about LP sleeves is it seems to me they never go out of fashion. You don't look at them and think 10 years later, they give it a bit of a facelift, or do you think that? I don't know. If records get forgotten, or they don't get forgotten, and if they
just freeze the moment.
De-cigaretted. Did Abbey Road get de-cigaretted?
No, I don't
think so.
Don't.
I think it may have done.
Hang on,
that's interesting. Yeah,
it may have got de-cigaretted.
I remember a whole series of pictures of Courtney Love, weren't there, with smoking a cigarette? Admittedly, she was pregnant. Is that a recent sleeve, Dave?
This is the reissue of the. This is the one that was reissued last year or whenever it was. He still got the cigarette.
Oh, right.
He still got the cigarette. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
But I think there have been other cases where I think
don't
you're right.
Just freeze a moment. They freeze a moment in time.
And
that's you connect that with the time that record came out. So it wouldn't get out of
record sleeves as well. Is that if it's a great record, then the sleeve becomes sort of iconic.
Absolutely.
No,
It's as simple as that.
It's absolutely right. It's like the names of bands. If they're a really well-known band, you put up with their awful names.
Yeah.
You know, the Beatles, U2.
Arctic Monkeys. I mean,
Arctic Monkeys.
When I first
you accept that that's
Monkeys, you go, they're going to go far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've collected all this together in a book.
I have indeed. Yeah, and it's also got kind of memories of, you know, I was fortunate enough to sort of take a few snaps along the way as well. So in the days before, you know, phones and cameras and such, I used to take a few snaps. So, you know, a lot of the time it's just kind of being in the right place at the right time. So it's nice to have those memories. And that was sort of the lockdown experience, the first lockdown. We should number them now, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, lockdown 2.
Lockdown 1. Yeah.
You know, I went through all my archive and thought, well, you know, I got some encouragement because I got involved in a couple of those Tim Burgess listening parties for the Style Council, and there was so much love for that stuff, and because I kept everything, little sketches and such like. And
so you had kept everything.
I kept everything, yeah. So I thought, well, it's just nice to present it in a book, and a lot of the photographs hadn't been seen because they were sort of personal photographs, just because I happened to be there and if had done anything with them. So it was a good, you know, best part of 30 years of working with Paul, going from, you know, starting with the Style Council through to his, you know, big chunk of his solo career, and also, you know, 10 years of working with Oasis and a number of years of working with George, and plus all the other people along the way.
And you were involved with Stanley Road, weren't you? And the stuff.
I was indeed, yes. Yeah,
collages, beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful
that was
sleeves.
a great experience. I mean, that's the first of 3 record sleeves I ended up doing with Peter Blake. We did Stanley Road in, excuse me, 95. And then I did Stop the Clocks with him, which was the Oasis kind of retrospective in 2006 or thereabouts. And then last year I worked with Peter with Pete Townsend on the latest Who record. So yeah.
Was it your suggestion to get him in, or was it the band's suggestions?
With the Style Council, it was my suggestion. I'm sorry, with Stanley Road, it was my suggestion. I said to Paul, "What do you think?" And the idea was really just to see if he would do a poster or something. I didn't think for one second he would do the cover art, because I thought that was a big ask. But I think, you know, secretly it was just Paul and I wanted to meet him. You know, just that was it really. And I was friendly, or I am friendly with Mary McCartney, whose father was the bass player in Wings, you might remember, and he had a passing acquaintance with Peter Blake, so I got his number through Mary, and we went and met him one evening, had a cup of tea, and he was so lovely, and he said, "I'll do whatever you want me to do," and so it was great. And that was also, I think, a combination. It was a great sleeve, any way you slice it. I mean, he did a fantastic job. But I think because the record was so good, I mean, that was kind of Paul, where all the stars were aligned. You know, the band sounded great, the songs were flowing out of him, he looked great. It was the perfect sort of moment in time, that sort of Brit-pop moment, whatever if you want to call it Brit-pop, but it was that perfect moment where he was sort of being reassessed. And yeah, I mean, I think it sold 2 million copies in the UK or something, which is, you know, a lot of records.
Quite a bit of it to do with that cover, I think. It was absolutely quite a bit of that was to do with that cover.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
have you got it there?
So yeah, I have got it here. Yeah,
hold it up. Just remind us. It's fantastic. It's the collage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and we also contributed
all the old mod imagery of the target and everything. It's fabulous.
So it's nice. So we all came up with our own little bits and pieces. You know, I think the John Lennon cigarette card, and then a bubblegum card was mine, and sort of the Paris thing was mine, and some Empire State thing was mine. The London thing was mine. These were Paul's. That was Paul's. But the idea of having a picture of the young Paul holding the picture of the older Paul was Peter Blake's, and it's just genius, I think, because
great idea.
The album sort of seems got a sort of a slightly autobiographical feel to it anyway, and it was just hit after hit after hit. I think I had 4 or 5 singles off that album, and it was just, again, the floodgates had opened creatively for Paul at that time. So That's a great record to be.
So when you design now, do you still design for the LP?
Yeah, I mean the Who thing last year. I mean, I think they did 3 different vinyl formats. They even did a cassette, which is just something that people have.
That's so retro, isn't it? Cassette.
Yeah.
Far more so than vinyl.
You ought to do an 8-track.
I was going to say it's like doing a 78, a shellac. You know.
The unit cost was like $40 a piece or something.
Yeah.
I thought if you're going to do a cassette, you might as well do an 8-track just for the.
Oh, so you did?
Yeah, and it was just too expensive. I think it was something like $40 a unit or something.
That's amazing.
So how have you been occupying yourself during the last 6 months doing this, book?
Doing the book. I mean, the book came around really quickly because I put it on Kickstarter in July, and it met its target like in 6 hours or something daft, which is nice, which covers the cost of printing it and such like. And then the rest of the time was spent designing it and getting it to the printers. And as I say, it's due. It's been printed in Italy. It's a nice chunky style book as well. You know, it's just hold it with 2 hands.
So it's a large. You haven't got
it's a coffee table number.
Yeah.
Have you got the finished cover there?
Say again, sorry.
Have you got a finished cover you can show us?
I've got a finished cover here actually, but it's very nice.
Okay,
I'm sure it is.
Very eye-catching.
We shall get people to inspect it. That's brilliant.
So,
well, look, usually, have you got any other just little mementos that you were?
I've got a few little things that I wanted to share with you. I lived in Los Angeles for in the early part of the 90s, from 90 to 96, and I was still doing Paul's stuff, and that's when I sort of became more friendly with George actually, because George was living out there at that time, and it was just a really fun time to be out there. And when I moved back from Los Angeles in 96, Paul gave me a present, you know, sort of a welcome back home present, which I sort of wanted to share, which is one of his.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's gorgeous.
I sort of
genuinely worth a few bob, let's be honest. That's great.
It's just, you know, it's just a lovely thing. It's still got a couple of, you know, little marks on it, you know.
So it's pre-loved, as we would say.
Yes.
So that was, you know, I treasure that obviously, and
very good.
That's such a nice thing. And in fact, I mentioned it in the book actually.
Do you play?
No, I don't play. No, it's just literally I've always loved the shape of a Rickenbacker, and
absolutely.
I make no secret of telling
stand in front of mirrors with it, presumably.
Standing exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And you know, listen, as I say, I'm a sort of a bit of a hoarder, and one of the things that we did in the 90s was make these bags.
What?
That's lovely, isn't it? Isn't that didn't you give one to Tom Hanks?
Well, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. I was, you know, I part of living in Los Angeles is that's when I kind of dipped my toe in the film world and got involved in producing, or tried to produce, in fact, but eventually ended up making Sleuth back in 2008, and because I'd become friends with Jude Law, and Jude, lots of people were given those bags. I think we did about 20 or 30 of them, but you know, Weller had one, the Gallaghers had one, and I'd given one to Jude, and Jude was shooting The Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks, right, the Sam Mendes film, and Paul Newman, all these greats. And he came back from a break and he said, I just got a bit of a favour to ask. And he says, well, this is Tom Hanks saw my bag. And you haven't got a spare one, have you? I said, yeah, absolutely, of course. So I gave it to him. He went back to continue shooting. And then, you know, I got a FedEx in the post with this. If you can see that.
Oh, that's his thank you. I'd like to feel that Tom Hanks is the man to send a thank you letter.
That is exactly what you want Tom Hanks to do, isn't it?
Tell us what it
Just read out what he says.
It says, "Dear Simon, my official Beatles bag is gear, fab, and makes me want to jump on a British European Airways and go and perform for the Queen in a command performance. Thanks for the gift."
Excellent. Yeah. So hold that up again, Simon, the bag.
Oh, the bag, yeah.
Now, the actual bag, because for people who are not aware, I mean, when the Beatles arrived at Kennedy in '64, they held BEA bags, didn't they? Is that right?
Yeah, it's one of those trips. Yeah.
But they weren't flying BEA.
No, I don't. They must have been from another. But I guess
I think TWA or Pan Am or whatever. But they obviously some deal had been done that when you get
product placement.
When you get down the steps in the biggest photo call in history, which is effectively what it was, you will be holding these.
Yeah.
How much were they paid for? That's brilliant, isn't it?
Well, probably not much is the truth of what they were paid.
You imagine they must have been.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Maybe they were. Maybe just those were the bags they happened to have. That's true. It's probably just coincidence.
Given a bag and gone, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, but all
no money would
four
have
of them,
changed hands.
all four of them had them. Of course, BEA went out of business not long afterwards.
Yeah,
but it's still remembered by Simon. Doing his special.
I know, it's funny.
That's right.
I gave a friend of mine. Pedro Romani was a video director, and he was shooting a video with Paul McCartney for Driving Rain. Do you remember? Yeah. And so I said to Ped, "Oh, give Paul a bag. He might get a kick out of it." And then I mentioned to Weller that I'd done that. He goes, "I wouldn't have fucking done that, mate, if I was you. You have the lawyers on you." And so all of a sudden, I'm leaving messages for Pedro. Don't give him the bag. Don't give him the bag.
I can't believe.
Yeah. Anyway, Pedro gives him the bag, and he was lovely about it. Apparently, he said, "I just want to shake your, and tell your friend I'm really appreciative of it. This, that, and the other." And because Pedro hadn't got the messages because he was shooting, and he'd given him the bag, and he was very appreciative. And then I saw Mary, and she saw that I had the bag, and she goes, "Oh yeah, Dad's got the bag." And I think, "Oh, that's nice." She, "Yeah, it's in with the lawyers." Yeah, without missing a beat.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, look, we usually end with the greatest record ever made. So, have you got any suggestion for what you think is the? And again, this is entirely up to you.
Yeah,
there is no wrong answer.
I just think it is the greatest record ever made, and it's "Hey Jude" by the Beatles.
Oh, well, Lord.
Okay,
well, you can't go wrong.
So that's the one.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those songs where you just. I mean, I marvel. That was one of the records actually that I got bought at the time. So I would have been 9 or something.
Yeah.
What a record. What a sound. Just break, like whatever, and everyone just sounds great on it, doesn't
There's a great version of it on the David Frost show on YouTube.
Oh,
fantastic. It's fantastic. When they do it it's a live vocal, everything else is mimed.
Yeah.
But it's so good. They bring on all the gang and all these bit part actors and mates of theirs.
Paul just looks amazing on that, doesn't he?
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
So
really good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Simon.
Oh, well, thank you.
We shall vigorously plug the book, which will be available soon. And it's so nice to see all that. It's a really good book. It's lovely to see all that stuff between two
so much. Really
what a very good use of your time in lockdown. Enjoy lockdown too.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. Great to see you. Thanks so much for doing it. All right. All the best.
Cheers.
Bye.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.